Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, former Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam. He's written a book on the faithful presence, the promise and peril of faith in the public square. Governor, you mentioned former Senator and Majority Leader Howard Baker. You mentioned he often said that pay attention to what the other guy says, he might be right. Are there any politicians left that think like that? Can you name some?
You know, it's gotten more and more difficult. Let me answer this. Yes, I think there are some, and at the risk of leaving out some, I won't say it. But I will say that your point's a fair one, Pat. You know, today it's like we reward people more for being social media stars than we do for actually solving problems. And I always say, you know, we obviously divide things between left and right, red and blue, but it might be more helpful to divide people between those who are just trying to make a point and those who are trying to actually make a difference and solve problems. You mentioned social media. You see all of us more politically, more and more in separate worlds to get our news and information. You also see that people out there not only don't disagree on the issues, they don't like or even trust the people on the other side. How do you suggest we overcome that kind of polarization and that kind of separation, that kind of separate worlds that we all live in? Yeah, you did a nice job, but I think it's to know how to get past it, you have to know how you got there. And today, because we can choose our own news and you can go to exactly the point on the political spectrum that you want and hear your news. And by the way, we all like being told what we think to be true already. And then social media, you can even further kind of specify exactly, here's who I want to be talking with. Well, we've all gotten caught in our own bubbles and think that everybody thinks like we do. One of the things you have to remember is the country is evenly divided, right? I mean, it's been a long time since somebody's gotten more than 53% of the vote in a presidential election. The Senate's 50-50. The House is almost evenly split, 6 or 7 votes separated. We have to remember that we're divided, and when you're mad about it, you have to realize, like, well, there's almost as many people that think opposite of what I do as think like I do. And so that's a really good, healthy place to start, is everybody doesn't see the world the way I do, and this is a democracy. Governor, after you finished your manuscript, you came back and added a foreword. It came in January after the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Why did you feel you had to go back and add that, and what did you want to say to people in that foreword? Yeah, I just thought there was such a significant event. I mean, the Capitol literally under siege. We had our elected representatives running for cover, being protected by Capitol Hill police and others. We had people threatening the vice president's life. That just, it just hadn't happened in our country, at least since the British came back in 1814. And I think a lot of people looked around and said, how did we get here? Regardless of where you were on the issues, like, how did we get here where a group of people decided to take it upon themselves to storm the Capitol to try to change the results of an election? Some in Congress want to have a blue ribbon panel similar to what we had after 9/11 to study what was going on, yet it appears to be deadlocked in Congress. Republicans are pushing back against it. Are we losing the national glue that keeps this country united? Well, I do worry about that we're losing that glue. Again, sort of for what we talked about before. Everybody thinks I'm right, they're wrong, and they're even wrong for bad reasons. When you think about the things that have brought our country together in the past, whether it be a war or 9/11, we've realized that those things that we most fundamentally believe in are under attack. And I would say that we're, again, back to one of those points. Again, regardless where you're on the political spectrum, that really requires us to, let's set aside kind of our own passions and say, what, for the good of the country, what's the discussion? What are the discussions that we need to have? You have a strong pastoral tone to your book. That's not surprising. You looked at going into the ministry when you came out of college. When you were mayor of Knoxville, you once compared your job to being the senior pastor at a church, not a CEO. What did you mean about that? And should politicians today be more like pastors and less like politicians? Well, I should be clear. What I didn't mean about that is I wasn't there to give a sermon to the city or to make my faith the city's religion. I meant this. Being elected office at its best is about relationships. and relationships with people of all different types. And if you talk to most pastors, they'd say, you know, it's interesting. My congregation have people coming from different places on the political spectrum, but also different desires. Some folks think we need to put more of our focus on our middle school and high school ministry, and others think we need to increase our international missions budget, and others think we need to do more for our homebound. And all those are good things. And it's sort of like being a mayor or governor. Oftentimes you're deciding between people who want various things to focus on, all of which are good things.
You've always been a Republican, the party of Lincoln, the party of Reagan. How do you feel today now that the head of the party is Donald Trump, who you've often been critical of over the last couple of years? What do you do about reaching out to the people you're trying to reach in this book, particularly in Tennessee, who are big fans of Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, my book is written to people who say, my faith is the central thing in my life. And so what I'm urging people, again, whether you're on the right or left, is to say, if that's true, then let's make certain that our faith actually looks like the person who we say we're trying to follow. And it's easy in politics. I've been guilty of it myself, to get caught up in your own desires and your own opinions about here's what's next for the country. But in doing that, we often don't look very much like the person we're trying to follow.
Tennessee is such a strong state for Donald Trump. The evangelicals in this state, perhaps those are all across the country, are definitely in Donald Trump's category. So where is your place in the Republican Party? Are you one of those who might be looking at a third party in the future?
No, I mean, no, I'm not. I mean, I've been a Republican for, since I've been a voter, and the things that Republicans have traditionally believed in are those things that I think are right. I mean, if you look at what historically the Republican Party has stood for in terms of balanced budgets, in terms of believing that while there needs to be some balance, that the market is a better way to allocate capital than having the government do it.
How do you stay?
I believe that.
I'm sorry.
I believe that the United States should play a leading role in the world. Those things that we've traditionally believed in, I still believe in.
Go ahead.
The parties have swings, and it's true of Democrats, it's true of Republicans. And again, the fundamental things that first attracted me to being a Republican are still true.
But how do you stay effective in a party where, quite frankly, and this can be true on the Democratic side, there's so much misinformation around about the virus, about vaccines, especially about the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen?
It's one of the things I'd say is, again, to people of faith, we're supposed to be people of the truth. The truth matters. There's a line I quote in the Bible when Jesus is on trial and goes before Pilate, and he talks about truth, and Pilate says, "What's truth?" And that's kind of the way the postmodern man thinks. Like, well, who decides what truth is? Well, as people of faith, we still believe there's such a thing as transcendent truth beyond any situation and beyond any circumstances. And so we should be people that are always about that.
Governor, Tennessee's near the bottoms of the 50 states in COVID vaccinations. What can be done to make that better? Do you believe the failure of our state to have a strong response to vaccination could hurt the state in the future economic growth versus other states in the future? You did a lot of economic development. You know that companies look at the states that way.
Well, I think the vaccine is a sign of science at its best, of coming up with a great cure for a horrible virus that was infecting the world in record time. And it's amazing. All the different people that are involved in making that happen. It's amazing. I think over time, again, I think life has a way of bearing out. And so I think what you're seeing now is infection rates going way, way down, but particularly among those people who are vaccinated. And I think sooner or later, people are going to look around and say, there's a direct correlation between people who have been vaccinated and those folks who are no longer getting the virus. And ultimately, I think more and more people will be persuaded this is safe and the right thing to do.
So the misinformation will correct itself?
I think it will over time, because ultimately, like I said, it will play out. You'll look around and go, wow, my family's not vaccinated, and we've had, Uncle Joe caught the virus last week. When I look around and, the virus is going away, among those people who have been vaccinated. I think the actual results will prove out over time.
Former Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam is our guest on Inside Politics. Back to continue our conversation with the governor about his new book after this break.